Okay, so you don't need to know a lot of math to be able to solve this problem without using a calculator. So let's go ahead and take a look at the problem. We have the square root of 8 divided by the square root of 2 times the square root of 4 all over 2. Okay, now we do have a multiple choice question here, and let's take a look at our answers. So A is 1/2, B is 2, C is 4, and D is 32. All right, so one more time, no calculators, but if you have the answer, go ahead and put that into the comment section. I'll show you the correct answer in just 1 second. Then, of course, I'm going to walk through step by step and solve this problem. But before we get started, let me quickly introduce myself. My name is John, and I have been teaching middle and high school math for decades. And if you need help learning math, check out my math help program at tcmathacademy.com. You can find a link to that in the description below. And if this video helps you out, or if you just enjoy this content, make sure to like and subscribe, as that definitely helps me out. All right, now some of you might be saying, hey, Mr. YouTube Math Man, I'm pretty good in basic math, but I'm a little bit confused with these square roots right here. Now, some of you, or hopefully all of you, know that the square root of 4 is 2. Now, if you know that, that's fantastic. But I think this part of the problem is going to confuse some of you. But what you want to do here is just take a logical guess, right? What do you think the square root of 8 divided by the square root of 2 could mean? Now, remember, the correct answer is one of these right here, and hopefully you see your answer that you are taking a guess with, right? So if you can kind of figure out what to do here, well, hopefully you can get the right answer. But let's go ahead and take a look at the correct solution. The correct solution here is 2, which of course is option B. All right, now if you got this right, you definitely get a happy face and an A plus. Congratulations. And if you're like, hey, Mr. YouTube Math Man, I got this wrong. I ended up with 1/2 or another answer. Well, no big deal. We're going to go ahead and walk through the solution right now. Okay, so the first thing is when you try a math problem and you don't get it right, you should never feel bad about that. Okay, so learning math is a process of, trying a problem, making mistakes, figuring out what went wrong, and improving, right? So if you didn't get this right, well, it means that you don't understand something. Now, hopefully, you wrote out all your steps, right? So you're like, all right, I did this, and I did this. So if you just kind of looked at this problem and you're like, oh, I know what the answer is. It's like 1/2. Well, if you didn't write anything out, you're not going to understand what part of the problem you don't, get, right? So you want to write out all your work in mathematics. But for those of you that are math students and you still have to take an exam and you have a multiple choice exam, what should you do? Well, if you don't know how to solve a problem, well, you should just take a guess. You have a 1 out of 4 chance to get this thing right, but try to take some sort of educated guess. So never feel bad about taking a guess. It's far better than leaving a question blank. Okay, now some of you might be saying, all right, Mr. YouTube Math Man, let's see here. I'm going to take a guess. So maybe the square root of 2 times the square root of 4. Maybe this is like 2 times 4. Maybe that's like the square root of 8. So now I have the square root of 8 divided by the square root of 8. So anything divided by itself is 1. So maybe the numerator is 1. So maybe this is like 1/2. Well, that is a fantastic guess. Unfortunately, it's wrong. Okay, now if you chose 1/2 as your answer, well, I think that's a pretty good guess. Now you could see here we have 8, 2, and 4. So of course, maybe our answer has something to do with 4 and 32. Well, obviously the correct answer is 2. Okay, so we need to understand two aspects of this problem. Now, the first aspect is that we have division, we have multiplication, and we have a fraction. So we're going to need to understand how or what is the correct order to do this problem. So that's one component of the problem. And the second component of the problem is how to deal with square roots when it comes to division and multiplication of square roots. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into this right now and talk about this right here. So what is this? PEMDAS. Now, if you've never heard of this phrase or seen this acronym, well, this is really kind of goes to the heart of basic mathematics. Now, you may know a different acronym or know the rules here, but I'm going to go ahead and cover this right now. So PEMDAS, this is absolutely something that you need to put in your basic math long-term memory. And anytime you have a math problem that involves more than one math operation, so things like addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and powers, these are things that we can do with numbers, right? So if I have like 5 and 3, well, what can I do with 5 and 3? Well, I can add 5 and 3, I can subtract, I can multiply, I can divide. So again, these things right here are called mathematical operators or math operations. And anytime you have a problem that has more than one math operation, we need to know the correct order to do the problem, right? So in other words, should we do the multiplication first, or should we do the division first, or should maybe I divide this way? Well, PEMDAS is going to tell us what to do. Okay, so PEMDAS is effectively a checklist, and it's referred to as the order of operations in basic math. Now, it's a checklist, excuse me, that goes from left to right. And let me go ahead and tell you what these letters stand for. But before I do, I'm going to give you a cute little phrase that you can remember this little acronym right now. And it goes like this. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. One more time, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Now, I don't know what Aunt Sally did, but we thank her for her contributions to mathematics. All right, so let's go ahead and get into this right now. So P, so what does P stand for? It stands for parentheses. So if you have a math problem that has parentheses in it, well, you want to do all the math inside of those parentheses first. But technically, P, it does stand for parentheses, but really it's what we call grouping symbols, all right? So we use parentheses to group numbers together, but you can also use brackets or these kind of squiggly brackets as well. So if you see any sort of brackets or parentheses, that's where you need to start first. Now, if your problem has multiple parentheses and brackets, what you want to do is work from the innermost parentheses first, right? So you're going to do whatever is inside of those parentheses. Basically, think of this as its own little separate math problem. You're going to do that. Then once you're done doing that, you're going to continue on with the next set of inner parentheses, and you're just going to work your way out. Okay, so that is what P stands for. Now, if your problem doesn't have any parentheses, well, you just move on to the next step, which is E. Okay, so what does E stand for? Well, E stands for exponents, but basically you can think of this as powers. Okay, so if I have a power like 2 to the third power, what does this mean? Well, it means take 2 and multiply it by itself 3 times, all right? So anytime you're multiplying something by itself over and over and over again, we want to use a power expression. But when we have a power, there's actually two parts to the power. The top little number in the top right, this right here, this 3, is called the exponent, and this big number down here is called the base. So the exponent tells us how many times to multiply the base together. But this E right here stands for exponents, right? So just to be clear about that. Now, some of you might be saying, hey, Mr. YouTube man, why don't they just call it like P, right? So instead of exponents, why don't you just call it powers? Well, this could be confusing, right? Because maybe then we would start with powers in the parentheses. So to avoid confusion, we're going to put E as exponents. Okay, so this is our first two letters of the order of operations. And again, if you don't have these situations in your problem, you just move on to the next thing. Okay, now the next thing, matter of fact, I'm going to tell you what the rest of these letters stand for before I explain the rest of this. So M, D, A, and S. M stands for multiplication, D is division, A is addition, and S is subtraction. Now, a lot of you are going to be like, all right, Mr. YouTube Math Man, I know exactly what comes next. It comes, or what comes next is multiplication, right? And that is very logical. Unfortunately, that's wrong, right? Now, this is where a lot of people get angry. They're like, hey, you just told me this is a checklist. We're going to do this from left to right. Now you're changing your mind. Well, this is a very confused part of the order of operations. Okay, so what you're going to do next is multiplication or division, whatever you see first from left to right. So for example, if I have 10 divided by 5 times 2, let's take this problem. Matter of fact, let me take that problem. I'm going to write this over here. And then I'm going to create a similar problem. 5 times, or 10 times 5. No, let me do it this way. 10 times 2 divided by 5. Okay. All right, so let's take a look at these problems right here. So this first problem, what do we see first from left to right? Okay, well, we see division. Well, now we do have division and multiplication. So in this problem, because we see division first from left to right, we're going to do this first, right? 10 divided by 5. Of course, 10 divided by 5 is what? That's 2. So 2 times 2 is 4. Okay, so that is the answer to that problem. Now here we have 10 times 2 divided by 5. Okay, so what do we see first from left to right? We see multiplication. So we're going to do the multiplication first. So 10 times 2, of course, is 20. 20 divided by 5 is 4. All right, so I can tell you right now, as a math teacher that is graded maybe close to 10 million pieces of papers through the years, not that many, but you get the idea, a lot, all right? When you've been teaching math as long as I have, you've pretty much seen all the mistakes, and I've been, I'm sure I was making all these mistakes way back in the good old 1970s and 80s when I was in school as well. It's a very, very, very common basic math mistake is to confuse this multiplication or division aspect. So if you have multiplication and division in a problem, it's not always multiplication. Sometimes it can be division. So be very careful. And addition and subtraction work the same way. It's whatever you see first from left to right. Okay, so now that we understand the order of operations, we can go ahead and start applying our knowledge to solve the problem. All right, so here is our problem. Now, what's interesting about this particular problem is that we have like a fraction, right? So we have this big thing up here, which is our numerator, and then we have 2 as our denominator. So how should we handle this problem? Okay, so we have a big expression up in the numerator of this fraction, and then we have this number down in the denominator. So these type of problems, it's best to basically treat the numerator as its own separate problem and the denominator as its own separate problem. Now here we only have one number, but if we had a bunch of math stuff to do, what we want to do is simplify the numerator in general, okay, there are exceptions, and then simplify the denominator, and then once we've done that, then we can simplify the final fraction. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and focus in on the numerator because that's where all the action is in this particular problem. We only have one number down here in the denominator. So what do we have here? Well, we have division and we have multiplication. So do we have any parentheses? No. Do we have any exponents or powers? No. Do we have multiplication and division? Yes. What do we see first from left to right? We see division. So we're going to have to figure out what 8 or the square root of 8 divided by the square root of 2 is first. And then we're going to multiply that answer times the square root of 4. All right, so let's go ahead and get into that now. So the square root of 8 divided by the square root of 2. All right, so what could this possibly be? Well, some of you might kind of guess, well, maybe it's like the square root of 16. Maybe we like multiply these numbers, or maybe we divide these numbers, right? Maybe it's like 8 divided by 2, which is the square root of 4. Well, in fact, that's exactly what we're going to do, okay? So what we have to understand about this problem is a property of square roots. Okay, now some of you out there may not have studied the properties of square roots. Typically, this is taught like in an algebra course, but it's not that complicated, and I'm going to go ahead and explain it right now. Okay, so we need to figure out what the square root of 8 divided by the square root of 2 is. Well, the first thing that we should recognize is that we can write the square root of 8 divided by the square root of 2 this way. Okay, so this is like the numerator, and this is the denominator. Okay, so this is an easier way to express that, and a better way to think about this problem, because here I have an individual square root over a number in the numerator and an individual square root in the denominator. Well, there's a property of square roots that says when you have a square root of a fraction like this, where you have an individual square root in the numerator and an individual square root in the denominator, we could just put one big square root over the numerator and the denominator this way. Okay, so we can write the square root of 8 over the square root of 2. This is equal to the square root of 8 divided by 2. Okay, now if you have this expression, you can also write it this way. Okay, so this is a property of square roots, and this is pretty cool because the square root of 8 divided by 2 is what? Well, 8 divided by 2 is 4, so all of this is equal to the square root of 4. Now, of course, most of you out there should know that the square root of 4 is 2, but I'm gonna kind of hold off on simplifying this down any further. because I want to show you a few other properties of square roots. Okay, so the square root of 8 divided by the square root of 2 is equal to the square root of 4. All right, so we thought about this problem. We're focusing in on the numerator. We have division and multiplication. We're going to do the division first. So the square root of 8 divided by the square root of 2 is the square root of 4. But of course, we have to multiply this by another square root of 4. Okay, now at this stage of the game, hopefully all of you can figure out the problem, right? Because the square root of 4 is 2, and this is going to be 2 times another square root of 4, which of course is 2. So 2 times 2 over 2. Well, hopefully you see why the answer is 2. But I want to go ahead and show you another property of square roots. But let's go ahead and take another step, and that is to check this out. Now, I wouldn't stop this lovely math video unless I need your help. Okay, now I have a goal, and my goal is to reach as many people as possible. Now, what I try to do on my YouTube channel is teach math in a clear and understandable and a kind of a relaxing way. I definitely don't want to kind of come off as a technical math teacher, or kind of as someone who's reading from a math book. I want to try to make math interesting, and most importantly, I want to encourage those of you that maybe have a tough time with mathematics to never give up. All right. So I'm telling you right now, all of you can be successful in math, but it does take time and commitment. And most importantly, it takes great math instruction. So if you need additional help in mathematics beyond, my little YouTube videos, check out my full main math courses. You'll find links to those in the description of this video. And what we're talking about here, it's kind of combination of basic math and basic algebra. So I've got a couple of suggestions for you in terms of courses. So the first is my Math Skills Rebuilder course. In this course, I cover basic math, algebra, geometry, and a ton of other stuff as well. But you also might want to check out like my Pre-Algebra or Algebra 1 courses. All right, but please, if you like what I do on this channel, I definitely need your help to reach more people on YouTube. So please consider hitting that subscribe button. And if you're going to do that, hit that notification bell as well so you can get my latest videos. Okay, so let's go back and finish up this problem. And the answer is 2. Okay, now here we can say, all right, well, we got the square root of 4. The square root of 4 is 2. Hopefully you know that the square root of a number, matter of fact, let's just cover this real quick. The square root of 4 is what? Well, the square root of a number is what number times itself gets us back to this number. Okay, so it's not 1 times 1, it's not 3 times 3, it's 2. So 2 times 2 is 4, so the square root of 4 is 2. All right, so now we're going to take the square root of 4 times the square root of 4. Again, the square root of 4 is 2, so this is going to be 2 times 2 over 2. So we could think of this as this way. 2 times 2 is 4. 4 divided by 2 is 2. Or we have a fraction here, and we can cross cancel these like factors, right? This 1, 2 can cross cancel with this 2, and we're left with a 2. Okay, so the answer is obviously 2, but I wanted to kind of show you another approach here. And this is a longer approach, but the only reason I'm covering this because I want you to understand another property of square roots. Now, we did talk about how to deal with the square root of 8 divided by the square root of 2, right? We have a property where we can express that as the square root of 8 divided by 2. But how do we multiply two square roots? Well, in this case, it's pretty easy. The square root of 4 times the square root of 4, we already saw that we could take the square roots of these individual numbers. But what if we had like the square root of 4 times the square root of 3? Well, this would be something different, okay? So if we had that situation, you want to understand this property, and that is the square root of 4 times the square root of 4 is equal to the square root, one big square root of 4 times 4. So we have these two factors here, okay? The square root of 4 times the square root of 4. We can write this as the square root of 4, or excuse me, the square root of 4 times 4. So one big square root, which of course 4 times 4 is 16. So the square root of 16, of course, is 4. And now we have 4 divided by 2, which of course is 2. Okay, so you definitely need to understand how to work with square roots in mathematics. Now, I kind of think of this as basic math. Of course, some of you may not remember how to deal with square roots, in terms of dividing and multiplying square roots, but, hopefully, this little video is showing you that it's not that difficult, okay? So never be intimidated by a math problem just because you don't know what to do. It's just all a matter or all a function of learning the individual skills. And that's what math is all about. It's really about you know, not like, I need to learn algebra in a week. Well, that's not going to happen because there's just too many little individual skills you have to learn, practice, and master. The sum total of that is algebra. Okay, so this is why it's really important for you to write out your steps when you're doing a math problem because if you don't get this step or this step, that means you have to work on those specific skills. Okay, so with all that being said, I definitely wish you all the best in your math adventures. Thank you for your time and have a great day.